You know how it is, right? Someone tells you something in a lecture and it just goes in one ear and out the other. But what about when you have to actually do something, get your hands dirty and figure it out for yourself? That's the stuff that sticks. So today, we're going to dive into that idea and look at a really powerful method that turns learning from this passive thing into a truly active experience. Man, Benjamin Franklin just hit the nail on the head here, didn't he? This quote, it perfectly captures what we're talking about, the huge difference between just being told something and actually building that knowledge for yourself. This is the core idea we're going to unpack, the incredible power of involvement. Okay, so before we can really appreciate the solution, we've got to understand the problem. And for a lot of us, that problem probably looks pretty familiar. It's the traditional classroom, what some researchers call the spoon-feeding system. This slide just lays it all out so clearly. On the one hand, you've got the transmissive approach. Think of it like a one-way street. The teacher has all the information and just transmits it to the students, who are kind of seen as these empty buckets waiting to be filled up. But on the other side, you have the transactive approach. This is way more like a two-way conversation. Knowledge isn't just delivered, it's built together, and it actually transforms everybody involved in the process. And that transmissive spoon-feeding model, well, it creates a pretty clear power structure, right? The teacher is up top, the single source of truth, and students, they're basically just passive knowledge consumers. Success becomes all about how well you can memorize stuff and spit it back out on a test. There's not a lot of room for students to take charge or really learn how to think critically for themselves. So you have to ask, are we teaching students how to think or just how to remember? Now, this isn't just an abstract problem. This passive model becomes a massive roadblock in certain real-world situations. Let's take a look at a really specific example. Trying to learn a new language, like English, in a country as linguistically rich and complex as South Africa. And this number, wow, this really puts it all into perspective. Just 9.6% of people in South Africa speak English as their first language. But it's the language of business, law, and, here's the kicker, the language of instruction in schools from grade 4 on up. So you can imagine the insane pressure on these students to master a language they might never even hear at home, and they're often trying to do it in a classroom that isn't set up for active, hands-on learning. So if the whole spoon-feeding thing isn't cutting it, what's the alternative? Well, that brings us to the good stuff. It's all about a fundamental shift in focus, away from being told something and towards actively doing something. It's all about learning through experience. This is really the beating heart of that transactive approach we saw earlier. The idea here is that knowledge isn't some fact sheet floating out there in the universe. It's a human artifact. It's something that we as people actually build. And we build it by engaging with everything around us, with the teacher, with the subject, and maybe most importantly, with each other. I just love this quote. It completely reimagines what a classroom can be. Teachers aren't walking, talking textbooks, and students are not just sponges passively soaking up information. No, they're active, thinking, creative people taking part in their own education. Okay, let me tell you this incredible little story from the research because it makes this so real. There's a workshop happening in Nyanga, a township near Cape Town, and a young girl there, she doesn't know the word bounce. So instead of just giving her a definition, the facilitator, a guy named Stephen DeMina, says, imagine I am a ball, and he just starts jumping up and down. That's bouncing. And boom, just like that, through a physical, lived moment, she gets it. She didn't just memorize a definition, she understood the word. That moment, that story about the word bounce, is the perfect gateway into a very specific method that brings this whole idea of experiential learning to life. It's something called process drama. Now, I know when you hear the word drama, you probably think of Shakespeare, a stage, an audience, all that stuff. But process drama is totally different. The goal here isn't to put on a show for other people. The key is right there in the name. It is all about the process. It's about living through a made-up situation together so you can explore a big idea or a tough problem from the inside. And this isn't just a free-for-all. It's actually a very thoughtful, structured process. It starts with the initiation phase. That's where everyone gets into character and builds the fictional world. Then comes the experiential phase. This is the real meat of it, where the group explores and investigates the situation. And then, and this part is absolutely critical, it ends with a reflective phase. That's where everyone steps out of the drama to talk about what just happened and figure out what it all meant. So that all sounds great in theory, right? But what does it actually look like? How does a teacher make this happen in a real classroom with real students? What are the tools? Okay, one of the most powerful tools is called teacher in role. And this is a huge shift. The teacher actually steps down from being the all knowing authority figure and joins the fictional world right alongside the students. They might pretend to be a clueless newcomer, or a skeptical journalist, or even the bad guy. And by doing that, they can guide the learning not by lecturing from the front of the room, but by collaborating from inside the story. Just imagine your class starting like this. The teacher doesn't walk in and say, "Good morning, open your books." Instead, they just start yelling, "Can anyone hear me? I am stuck in the elevator." Right away, the entire dynamic of the room has changed. The students are no longer just students. They're potential rescuers. They have a real, immediate, and motivating reason to communicate and solve a problem together. And that flows right into another amazing technique called the mantle of the expert. The students are given a new identity, a new role. They're not just a group of 10th graders anymore. Now they're a team of world-class scientists trying to solve a pandemic. Or maybe they're detectives investigating a crime. It empowers them, it gives them real responsibility, and it makes their learning feel like it actually matters. So we get what process drama is and how it works, but why? Why is it so incredibly effective, especially for something that can be as terrifying as learning a new language? Well, the answer has everything to do with the deep, powerful connection between our emotions and our ability to learn. There's this key concept in psychology called affect. And really, it's just a word for all the emotional stuff, our feelings, our moods, our attitudes, that has a massive effect on how we behave. You see, learning isn't just a mental exercise. It's not just happening in our brains. It's deeply emotional, and our feelings can either slam the door shut on learning or they can swing it wide open. Researchers talk about something called the affective filter, and you can think of it like a wall. When we're feeling anxious or unmotivated or we're afraid of making a mistake, that wall goes way, way up, and almost no new information can get through. Process drama is basically designed to tear down that wall. It creates this safe, non-threatening space where it's okay to play. It lets students speak through a character, which lowers their anxiety, it builds their confidence, and all of a sudden making a mistake isn't scary anymore. It's just part of the game. And really, it all boils down to this, a point made so beautifully by the linguist Earl Stivik. At the end of the day, success in a classroom isn't really about the fancy technology or the newest textbook. It's about the human stuff. It's about what's going on inside and between the actual people in that room. So, when you put all these pieces together, the idea of learning by doing, the specific tools of drama, and this focus on making learning feel emotionally safe, what you get is a total reinvention of what it means to be a student. Let's just look at this side by side. In that traditional classroom, the student is a consumer. The teacher is the authority. The focus is just on the brain, and the goal is just spitting information back. But in a process drama classroom, it's a whole new world. The student becomes a producer of knowledge. The teacher is a partner. The focus is on both the head and the heart. And the goal isn't just memorization. It's about making real, lasting meaning for yourself. And so it leaves us with this one big final question to think about. For so long, education has been built on this metaphor of filling an empty vessel. But what if that metaphor has been wrong the entire time? What if the real job of learning isn't to fill a void at all, but to light a fire of curiosity, of creativity, and of confidence that will keep burning long, long after the class is over?